Hola, soy Abigail, and this is Breaking the Set. So, seems Senator Diane Feinstein had a change of heart this week when she went from being a cheerleader for the NSA to calling for a top-to-bottom review of the agency in the wake of the spying on allies leak. And just yesterday, Feinstein put forth a bill that would allegedly reform the spying agency's surveillance practices. But then I read the fine print. The bill basically leaves the bulk metadata collection untouched and codifies the practices already put in place. Well played, Senator. Nice 360 on that one. Looks like the same old Diane Frankenstein to me. Happy belated Halloween, everyone. Let's go break the set. So a lot has changed since the world learned about NSA spying. Foreign leaders are outraged, public protests are growing, but there's one thing that hasn't changed at all. NSA spying all day, every day. Thankfully, activists here in the U.S. are also taking it to the streets. At a recent rally called Stop Watching Us, I saw a unique performance done by privacy advocates Shahid Buttar and Kristen Arant. So I asked them to come on this show and perform it for you.
NSA breaks the law every day. Doesn't matter who you are or what you say, they monitor your phone calls and emails anyway. Corrupt Congress and courts, paving the way. Here's a lesson they want you to learn someday. Watch what you say. They spy on your mind, record your calls for posterity, commit daily executive crimes with impunity. They're the authorities here to keep us safe until inevitably the boot ends up on your face. It's the NSA versus the Constitution. We the people are the ones our agencies are abusing. We can force any agency to make a new choice when we build a movement by each raising our voice. Demands for private information misused, gagging recipients of First Amendment views attached to the Patriot Act national ruse. First, we lose the privacy that enables speech. Then we let our government expand its reach into your bank accounts, your medical records, your teacher's feedback, your ISP, your browsing history, mental seed bank, the library down the street if it were still open. The Bureau threatens democracy. I'm not joking. Our rights are in the scope. We are all on the rope. Poke at 3 letters, NGI. It stands for the next generation for the FBI. Deporting immigrants en masse with ICE, while we citizens pay an equal price. Less demand for housing, less tax revenue, crops rotting on the vine. What else do? We'll take the local cops' arrest data, give it to the feds, but take a look at what the FBI itself said. If we start with immigrants, that'll give the plan cred. It already led well beyond mass deportation. Instead, the Bureau has a file, a price on your head. Your fingerprints, your iris patterns, the sound of your voice, a national ID imposed without choice. There is blood on our Constitution. But check it out, it's still moist. See, it's the agencies versus the Constitution. We the people are the ones our government is abusing. We can force anybody to make a new choice when we build a movement by each raising our voice. Raiding the homes of peaceful activists, setting in motion predictable plot twists, arresting democracy to bind her wrist. This miseducation of a gullible nation shows the ruination of our country's creation. You can say be patient, but the Bill of Rights hastens to fall to pieces before our very eyes. Do everything you're told till you realize our rights got sold. Beware the 05. Into any group goes the FBI's eyes. Intelligence about legal behavior, the prize, panopticon, Stasi, informants every size, shape, and color. You're being watched by Big Brother right now. Every email, every call, before national security, our Constitution falls. The FBI's probably got informants walking your halls. It's the FBI versus the Constitution. We the people are the ones our agencies are abusing. We can force any government to make a new choice when we build a movement by each raising our voice. When we build a movement by each raising our voice. Back in the day during World War I, it was the FBI versus free speech holding the gun. Hard-fought constitutional rights on the run. The Palmer raids, the first, but not the last one. Fast forward 40 years to the real Red Scare. McCarthy did a number, but the FBI was there. They were everywhere. They knew what you wore to bed. They prosecuted people for the thoughts in our heads. They tried to drive MLK to suicide. No one even knows why Brother Malcolm died. Fred Hampton killed in his own house inside. They even bombed Earth activist Judy Barry's car and lied in the those lies go all the way up the chain of command. The agencies lie to judges on the stand. The director, the head honcho, the man claims his lies were unplanned and that he didn't understand that it's the agencies versus the Constitution. We the people are the ones our government is abusing. We can force anybody to make a new choice when we build a movement by each raising our voice.
Shahid, your poem Agency versus We the People, how did that manifest out of your political activism?
It's a creative reflection on the same kind of things I do in my day job, and I feel like the audience for policy is only so big, and art and culture has a way of speaking to people's spirits, right, in your heart rather than just your head. So for me, it's just a way to express with more parts of myself the same convictions that I have a chance to vindicate through my work at the Bill of Rights Defense Committee.
I've realized that spoken word actually resonates with a lot of people more so than just, giving them a speech. Why do you think that is?
Oral history is one of the first kind of ways that people participated in discourse, right? And the idea of there being a performative element, the energy of a performance beyond the content of a lecture, I think is greater than the sum of its parts. Especially when you get an opportunity in a live setting for poets to have that back and forth, the collaboration, that kind of energy, I think, is even more gripping. And it lends for an emotional experience that's way beyond merely the content.
I agree. You're also the executive director of the Bill of Rights Defense Committee. You were one of the sponsors of the Stop Watching Us rally, that amazing historic rally in D.C. last weekend. What did you think of the event?
It was amazing. We had thousands of people that came out, and as one would expect on civil liberties issues, it drew from the right and the left. And to see those diverse allies standing side by side, Tea Party influenced freshman member of Congress alongside Dennis Kucinich, right? To see the art and culture, there was a lot of music, there were a lot of visuals. To see all of that together with the very brainy reflections of, say, the NSA whistleblowers or some of the other people that spoke there was really exciting. And I think that especially at this moment, with the Snowden leaks creating so much mounting controversy around our government's domestic surveillance practices, and then coming in the immediate wake of the rally were these bills coming out of Congress, the USA Freedom Act, and I'll call it the NSA Entrenchment Act from Senator Feinstein. We're seeing the institutions respond to the dissent, and that, of course, makes it all the more compelling and exciting.
It was so incredible. I think years ago you would never see people out in the street protesting the Patriot Act, so it's just amazing to see people out of their computers into the public sphere demanding to repeal the Patriot Act, stop unwarranted blanket spying with the NSA. It was really, really amazing. And you mentioned the art and music, and that was one of the most captivating things, I think, the incredible unification with the signs, just incredible, everything that we're looking at right here is so beautiful. I mean, all the different materials, and then of course the bands you performed there. Why did they choose to incorporate this into the rally?
To make sure that it resonates beyond the people who understand the value of privacy. Social movements in our country have always been rooted in culture beyond policy, and so that was the idea with the bands, was to speak to different folks who might not necessarily care as much about the NSA, but like to hear a good beat. And the more different kinds of genres that a movement can cover and inhabit, the broader its reach to the American people. And ultimately, what we're talking about here, the struggle around domestic surveillance and constitutional rights, this is a battle for democracy against our nation's intelligence agencies. And if we confine ourselves to blogs and newspapers, we will lose. If it ends up being at dinner tables and on street corners and in classrooms and everywhere, that's when we win.
Right. I loved how it was also just like you can have fun. You can go out and have fun, have a great time, and hear great music, amazing art, and have a serious political message behind it. We know that there were 575,000 petitions delivered in those huge boxes right to Congress. Has there been any response from the petitions?
Well, the day after the petitions were delivered to Congress, Leahy and Sensenbrenner, the authors of the Patriot Act originally, introduced a bill that would basically curtail some of the worst abuses under that piece of legislation. And granted, they were working on that bill well before the petitions went to Congress, but I do think of the introduction of the USA Freedom Act as a very direct response to the mobilizations, the petition, the lobby day that was part of it, and the sustained clamor that's been coming from all sides of the political spectrum from every region of the country.
And what do you think about Diane Feinstein's 360-degree turn? First, here she is being the main lobbyist force behind the NSA spying, and then she goes out and says no, and now she's coming out kind of trying to codify all these illegal practices. Yeah,
her bill is a red herring. It's not at all a solution to any of the abuses. It really is a way to entrench them while painting a veneer of reforms on them. expect it to some extent from Senator Feinstein because she has been so lax in her capacity as chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, essentially abdicating the committee's oversight role to rein in the abuses of the intelligence agencies. It's useful to remember where the Senate Intel Committee started. It was the Church Committee in the 1970s, the last time Congress bothered to take a hard look at our nation's intelligence agencies. They found what the U.S. Senate described as a sophisticated vigilante operation aimed squarely at suppressing the legitimate exercise of First Amendment rights of speech and association. That committee grew out of that investigation only now to have been co-opted by the agencies it's supposed to be overseeing.
Sounds totally legitimate. You know, you were telling me before how people are fighting back on the state level, how the Bill of Rights Defense Committee is actually participating in that, facilitating that. Tell me more about how people can fight this.
There are a lot of different ways that dragnet surveillance happens. It's not just the NSA tapping your phone and the internet. It's also your local sheriff's department flying an aerial drone over your city. It's also your local police department working with a DHS-funded fusion center to collect intelligence information about people's associations, absent any suspicion of crime. Those are actionable policies that you don't need Congress to do anything about. You can fix those in your city councils and your state legislatures. You know, earlier this year, we helped get a bill through the state legislature of Texas, signed by the governor, to restrict surveillance drones. We've gotten bills through city councils to restrict the uses of fusion centers and intelligence collection. These opportunities are available to anybody, anywhere, and the work we do at the Bill of Rights Defense Committee is about coaching, working with those local coalitions to help secure Bill of Rights protections where you live.
Excellent. We cannot depend on the top-down federal level. We have to go from the grassroots, bottom-up, from our cities and local representatives. Shahid Buttar, Executive Director of the Bill of Rights Defense Committee, activist, poet, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, Abby.
Still ahead, I'll talk to L. Ron Hubbard's great-grandson about Scientology. Stick around. According to Pew Research Center, 84% of the world's people identify with a religion. Many of these faiths have stood the test of time and are rooted in centuries-old historical tradition. However, one very prominent religion was created just 60 years ago. Yes, I'm talking about Scientology, founded by none other than science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard. But not every member of the Hubbard family is a member of the church. His great-grandson, Jamie DeWolf, is actually one of the most outspoken critics of what he calls a cult.
My family written out of existence, and this disciple will never know the legacy of lies that I still carry in my last name. The wolf, a cover story to protect us from my great-grandfather's true children, the army of empty, who greet me in train stations with an e-meter and a personality test, and they ask me if I've ever heard of L. Ron Hubbard.
Jamie joined me earlier to talk about all things Scientology.
L. Ron was actually, oddly, one of my greatest inspirations when I was a kid because he was a writer, and he was a science fiction writer. And even as a young kid, I was given a lot of his books for Christmas and stuff like that, of his volumes, and of Mission Earth in particular. And as a little kid, I was like, this guy is a badass. You know, he has all these covers of guys with machine guns and laser guns and, you know, rocket ships. And it was, I grew up Baptist Christian, hilariously enough. And I actually had to learn who L. Ron Hubbard really was and what else he wrote besides science fiction in a book a pastor gave me about cults specifically. And that was what started a larger conversation, because in my family he was just literally something we didn't talk about. So he was my great-grandfather. His first son was L. Ron Hubbard Jr., who was my grandfather, and his first child was my mother. So I was the oldest child, I was the oldest grandchild, and I mean, it was just something that nobody ever wanted to discuss. And also, when I was a kid, that L. Ron Jr. was also actively battling against his father to basically his dying day. So it was just something that we just didn't bring up in the house because it was constant and current. And, you know, even now, some of my family won't talk about it. I'm actually one of the last people that will.
That's absolutely fascinating. You know, you're one of the most outspoken critics of Scientology. According to Village Voice, you're listed actually at number 22 out of 25 people crippling Scientology. Are you sad that you're not higher on that list?
No, I do not want to be higher on that list. That is, it's a little scary to even be on that list, I won't lie. I imagine that, you know, little Scientology compounds everywhere that they have like dossiers on every single person. They're like, all right, what are we doing about number 24?
Talk about the backlash you've incurred. I mean, I know that you're joking around right now, but really, I'm sure that there have been, I mean, we tried to cover a story here and we received, you know, the call from the church telling us not to run the story. I mean, what sort of experiences have you had? Any threats at all from the church for speaking out?
I mean, the very first time I spoke out about him was in 1999, and I did a performance about him in a cafe at a show that I had just started called Tourette's Without Regrets, and it was a show that was about it was like this kind of long diatribe about Scientology and just like cults in my family and everything. It was the first time I'd really publicly said anything about it in particular. And it went online, and within days that they were at my house, they had tracked me down. I'm pretty sure that they tapped my phones. I was being followed everywhere I went. And so, I mean, they basically come after you like some kind of pseudo-crazed mafia. I think that they don't want to bring more attention to just like the whole that side of my family and that story, because it's a little embarrassing to have the same namesake as your general like deity or great founder and leader actively warring against, you know, Scientology for his entire life as well. I mean, the story of L. Ron Jr. is a pretty nasty and embarrassing one, because he used to be a member of the cult as well, actually helped write a lot of their protocols that dealt with critics and strong-arm tactics. So he was well aware of how they were going to execute these tactics and oppression, because Junior also helped write him as well.
Why do you think a religion invented by a science fiction writer 60 years ago, I mean, this is recent history here, has become so wildly popular? Right. And I mean, we know that that e-meter machine is part of the initiation. I took one of those tests myself. What is it about that test, along with Dianetics, that sucks people into the church?
I think it's actually Scientology is actually a very brilliant form of brainwashing. One, because it's very process of the e-meter and so forth. It's really electrified hypnosis. You're being guided along this hypnotic state that is causing you to regress into your past lives, which also has this sort of overarching, like, kind of paranoid corporate structure to it, where you're trying to unlock your brain in the guidance of somebody else who has their own purposes. You don't see your results. So it's like you're holding this e-meter and it's running an electrical current through you while you're sort of being hypnotized in this process. And whatever they're writing down, you don't get to see. They own your secrets, right? This is not a client-attorney privilege or any kind of psychiatric relationship. This is information that they just own. They can put in a filing cabinet, and they can and will use it against you later. And as you progress up this what they call the bridge, which if you just turn it on its side, it's really just clearly a pyramid scam, really, where you're going towards OT level 8. And higher, which is basically at that point you're supposed to be a superhuman, continental, interdimensional being at that point. And that's where Tom Cruise is supposed to be at. That's where John Travolta is supposed to be at. But you're always moving up on this bridge. And if you express doubts, then they can reverse you on this bridge. You have to take these classes over again. You have to pay for it again. So there's this kind of bizarre, like, internal structure that has this internal societal pressure upon you. It has this paranoia on you. You start to believe that this machine can read your very thoughts. You can get sec checked, which is like this whole brutal sort of interrogation that they'll force you through. And so there's this entire climate of fear that surrounds all of it. And yeah, the fact that a sci-fi writer can suddenly turn around from writing fiction and then say, oh, now I've made brand new scientific discoveries that will change the world overnight with very little in the form of evidence or case studies is rather stunning. It makes sense in the time and climate that it came about. You know, in the 50s and the early 60s, that this is kind of viewed as like an exciting, new, revolutionary, innovative science. You know, at this point, it becomes laughable when you look at a lot of its secrets revealed, like OT Level 3 and Xenu and the evil galactic warlord and the alien souls that possess your body. But mind you, in the 70s, nobody knew that. Nobody had the internet. This is stuff that you had to earn your way to. You had to pay to brainwash yourself.
I wanted you to also just talk about the, people joining and becoming indebted and the financial manipulation, I guess, from people who aren't millionaires.
Right. Well, I think one of the reasons why celebrities become ensnared in it is, in a certain way, the whole sort of belief system is narcissistic in nature. You're basically on a path to become a godlike being. The whole idea is this is about you, that you yourself are a godlike being inhabiting this show. It isn't that Elron is God. Elron is basically like a Buddha or like the wisest scientist that has given us this technology, that has unlocked this. And it was still viewed that Elron was, a godlike being inhabiting this flesh shell, which happened to be a portly, red-headed, chain-smoking, middle-aged man on a boat. But past that is that there's a narcissism of it. 2, it's definitely the secrets, the fact that they own your secrets. They can absolutely use those against you. They absolutely will. 3, I think that some people have to realize that it's embarrassing to go that far up this pyramid and start to realize how absurd it actually is. And I think that that's personally humiliating, because the thing is that, and if there are Scientologists listening, feel free to tune in or turn up your volume, is that I don't have particularly a problem with the low-level Scientologists, because a lot of these are smart, productive people. They have to have some sense of a career in order to be able to even pay for these services. That's specifically the people they target. They target people who have money, that have careers, that have good professional standing. It's just that the problem is that Elron was literally freestyling the whole thing from the get-go. So as it goes further, it becomes more and more innately absurd and more explicitly insane. When you get to evil galactic warlords and the dead alien parasites that are clinging to your very body, well, at that point it becomes laughable. But you don't know about that for a long time, which is why the critics and the members who have left start screaming Xenu right away, because that's ultimately where it's going, right? Is that, if I hand you a Bible, you can read the book of Revelations in the first 5 minutes. You don't have to earn your way and pay your way and unlock each new chapter of the Bible. It's all given to you at once.
And I think that's the point, is that why should we trust an organization? I mean, I don't trust any religion, institutionalized religion, but especially one that makes me pay to get these secrets of God, or whatever, their interpretation of God is.
Right.
I wanted to move on, because we're almost out of time, Jamie, but I can't help but ask you, I mean, there have been a number of mysterious deaths associated with the church, most notably Lisa McPherson, who was held for 17 days by members before she died. I mean, do you think that the church is also covering up more serious crimes like blackmail and potentially murder?
There have been many statements that people have said that murder has certainly been on the menu in dealing with critics, let's say. That is what I've heard. Someone recently who I talked to, who is a very high-level defector, and I'll leave their identity secret for the moment, they made a terrifying point to me. They said Jonestown wasn't known, the People's Temple, right, and Jim Jones, wasn't known for suicides and murder before Jonestown, right? That was simply when you pushed against the wall, they came back firing and everybody died. And he said, who's to say that Scientology can't end in the same way? I mean, right now they're getting rocked with all kinds of allegations, with all kinds of lawsuits. They have high-level people who are leaving the church. Their number 2 and 3 people just left recently in the last decade. You have Tony Ortega at Village Voices blasting him every day. Your show's taking swings at him by even having me on. And that's the thing, is that how far is it going to go? Because at this point, you have a cult, a small cult that started, that has dwindling membership, but in this century, was part of the largest domestic case of espionage on its own government, on the United States government. And that's factual. That happened. L. Ron's wife went to jail for it, Operation Snow White. And, I mean, the fact that most Americans aren't even aware of how dangerous Scientology has been to their critics, the fact that I know I put myself in danger every time I even talk about it, and anybody who's dealt with the cult knows how dangerous that they truly are. I mean, I definitely have a sense that the empire is showing its cracks and it's starting to fall apart, because when you don't have any more secrets to sell, when all your secrets are online, how are you going to sell them anymore? And then what are you going to do once the whole temple's on fire?
Amazing to have you on. Jamie DeWolf, spoken word poet, performer, artist. I need to get you on again just to talk about your work, man. Really awesome to speak to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Abby. Bye.
Guys, that's the show tonight. Thanks for watching. Have an awesome weekend.